If you're the kind of person who gets dragged into other people's drama and then overthinks it all night, this is for you. If you don't fix this, you'll keep giving away your peace every time someone sends a heated text or drops their chaos on you. Today I'll give you one rule and one line that change how you react in that moment. We'll use them in a real Friday night text situation that normally ruins your weekend. If that sounds like something you need, stay with me. You're standing in your kitchen late at night, scrolling through a text thread you didn't want to be part of in the first place. Someone dropped a passive-aggressive message, another person misread the tone, and now the whole conversation is spiraling into something that somehow demands an emotional reaction from you. You feel your chest tighten as you read a line that has nothing to do with you but somehow still lands on you like a personal attack. You weren't even involved, yet your mind is already preparing a response, drafting defenses, and imagining arguments that don't need to happen. Here's the question that matters right now. How many times this week have you let someone else's chaos take control of your internal state? And here's the claim. Most of the emotional exhaustion you feel doesn't come from your own problems. It comes from the drama you adopt without realizing it. There's a cost to this. When you let everything around you pull on your attention and emotions, you end up feeling drained before your day even starts. You carry tension into work, you snap at people you love, you lose whole evenings replaying conversations that shouldn't have mattered at all. You lose focus, your productivity tanks, and your sense of self-control erodes one emotional hijack at a time. Most importantly, the noise inside you gets so loud that you can't hear your own intentions anymore. If nothing changes, you'll keep living inside everyone else's storm instead of building your own calm. Today, you're going to learn how to filter emotional noise the way Stoics did, not by shutting down or suppressing your feelings, but by drawing a clear boundary between what is yours and what is not. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to pause before reacting, refuse the mental invitations that lead to spirals, and walk through your day with more inner quiet even when people around you are loud. You'll use a simple decision filter to determine what deserves your emotional energy and what doesn't. You'll know how to stop coworkers, family, and online drama from hijacking your whole mood. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, financial, or legal advice. If you want steady Stoic focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships every week, this is the channel for you. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. The plan for today is simple. First, we are going to tear apart the belief that you must emotionally participate in anything that touches your life. Next, we're going to build a filter so you can tell instantly whether something is your responsibility or someone else's drama. Then, we'll train you to insert a pause long enough to reclaim your control. After that, we'll practice small sentences and boundary moves anyone can use even in messy situations. Finally, we will walk through a real Friday night moment where this tool stops you from reacting in a way that would have made everything worse. There's a moment coming later, when you get an unexpected text right before you leave work, that will show exactly how this lesson saves you from exploding at someone you care about. You will recognize yourself in that moment, and you'll see how the smallest shift in your response changes the entire direction of the night. Now let's start by cutting right into the heart of the issue, the belief that other people's emotional waves require you to drown with them. Because until you break that belief, nothing else we talk about will stick. And you're going to need this foundation when we reach that Friday night situation, because the skill you build right now will be the thing that keeps your weekend from getting derailed. You don't have to take ownership of every emotional signal that lands in front of you, and the sooner you stop doing that, the sooner your nervous system gets a break. Right now, you react to other people's tone, mood, and urgency as if every one of those signals is an instruction you must follow. The claim here is simple. If you want emotional control, you must separate the information you're receiving from the meaning your mind automatically assigns to it. If you don't, you'll keep living in a state of constant internal alarms that were never yours to begin with. The stakes are real. If you never learn this separation, you'll keep losing hours to arguments that never actually happened, you'll misread neutral moments as personal attacks, and you'll exhaust yourself trying to regulate emotions that don't belong to you. This works because your mind is built to fill in gaps. When you receive an incomplete signal, like a short text, a vague tone, or someone's irritated energy, your instinct is to interpret it as something about you. That's the oldest survival reflex in the book. Marcus wrote often about this in Meditations, reminding himself that it's not events that disturb people but the stories they tell themselves about those events. When you pause long enough to separate the raw signal from your interpretation, you interrupt that automatic story-making loop. Your brain shifts from reacting to choosing. And when you choose, you show up as the calmer, more grounded version of yourself instead of the one who jumps at shadows. You stop borrowing emotional assignments that were never actually given to you. The sentence you can use to create this separation is simple enough to remember under pressure. You say, "This is the signal I received, the meaning is something I'm adding." If you say it quietly to yourself, it interrupts that fast slide into overreaction. It reminds you that a text is just a set of words, a tone is just a vibration, and someone else's mood is their weather, not your forecast. You're not denying reality, you're stabilizing your own. Picture this in a real moment. You're at work on a Tuesday afternoon, and your manager sends a Slack message that just says, "We need to talk." No emoji, no additional context, no explanation. Your stomach drops. Your mind starts rehearsing every mistake you might have made in the last 2 months. You imagine a performance review that isn't even scheduled. You start typing responses, deleting them, checking your calendar, questioning your value, and spiraling into that familiar stress cycle. This is the old pattern. But now imagine you stop for 3 seconds. You take one slow breath. You say to yourself, "This is the signal I received, the meaning is something I'm adding." You notice that there's no actual content in the message. You notice that you're filling in the blanks with fear, not facts. So instead of sending an anxious reply or bracing for a disaster, you say something neutral and grounded, "Sure, what time works?" When the meeting happens later, you find out the conversation is about shifting a deadline or getting your input on a project, not the catastrophe your mind invented. You feel the difference in your body. You didn't waste an hour in panic. You stayed in control. Your tiny action today is straightforward. Choose one emotionally loaded message, text, email, Slack, DM, and before you respond, write down the raw signal. Write it exactly as it appears. Then write the meaning your mind added on top. That's it. That tiny separation creates enough space for your next move to be intentional rather than reactive. Take a moment with me right now to slow things down. Just 3 slow breaths. In through your nose, hold for a second, and out. Again, a little slower this time. One more. Let your shoulders relax a fraction as you breathe out. Now bring to mind the last moment someone's tone or wording triggered you. Don't dive into the story, just recall the basic signal you received. Sit with the difference between the actual signal and the meaning your mind added. Notice how much of the emotional weight came from the second part, not the first. This is the beginning of freedom. This is you choosing clarity over noise. You're going to see why this separation matters even more when we move into the idea that not every emotional wave requires a response. Because when you combine these two concepts, signal versus meaning, and reaction versus choice, you start stepping out of the emotional crossfire instead of standing in it every time someone else fires off a feeling. And in that Friday night moment later on, the one we opened earlier, this exact line is going to be the thing that stops you from texting back something you'd regret. There's a second shift you need if you want to stop getting dragged into drama, and it starts with this idea: you are allowed to respond on your timeline, not on the timeline of the person delivering the emotion. Most people don't realize how much power they give away by answering immediately. The claim here is simple: if you want emotional control, you must delay your reaction long enough for your thinking brain to come back online. When you reply instantly, you are basically borrowing someone else's state of mind and handing yours over in exchange. The stakes couldn't be higher. If you never build a pause, you will keep reacting from fear, resentment, or pressure. You will keep sending messages that don't represent who you are, just who you felt like in that split second. And those messages can cost you relationships, opportunities, peace, and even self-respect. This works because the human nervous system needs a moment to settle after a social trigger. Without that pause, your mind treats every message as if it's an emergency. You shift into fight or flight mode over a coworker's tone or a partner's abrupt text, and your body floods you with urgency that the situation doesn't actually require. A built-in pause cuts that chain. It lets your reaction shift from instinct to intention. This is something Epictetus hinted at when he said that events don't disturb you, your judgments do. A pause creates the space where judgment becomes optional instead of automatic. Inside that space, you can access the version of you that responds thoughtfully, calmly, and in alignment with your values instead of your stress. The line you'll use to create this pause is short and extremely effective. You say, "I'll think about this and get back to you." You can shorten it depending on context, "Let me think about this," or "I'll respond later today." These lines signal respect without surrendering your emotional autonomy. They buy you time. They slow everything down. They shift the interaction from reactive to measure. And they train the people in your life that you are not available for emotional demands on command. Picture how this plays out. You're sitting on your couch in the late afternoon, trying to finish a work task you've already procrastinated on. Your phone buzzes with a long, frustrated text from a family member who wants you to fix a situation you didn't create. The tone is sharp. The urgency feels unfair. They want an immediate answer. The old version of you would drop everything, feel cornered, panic about disappointing them, and send a rushed reply that either tries to solve their crisis or defends yourself in a way that adds fuel to the fire. Both reactions keep you stuck in their emotional loop. But with this new approach, you stop. You breathe. You reread the message without letting your mind jump to the worst meaning. You say out loud, "I don't owe an instant reaction." Then you type one calm line, "I'll think about this and get back to you later tonight." That single sentence diffuses half the intensity. You give yourself time to think. The conversation shifts from emotional heat to measured dialogue. And most importantly, you stay anchored. Your tiny action today is to create a personal reply window. Choose one category, texts, emails, Slack messages, DMs, and set a minimum delay rule. It could be 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or an hour depending on context. But the rule is this: you don't respond immediately unless it's urgent in the objective sense, not the emotional sense. If you do this for even one day, you'll notice how much calmer your communication becomes. Let's take a slow moment here. Breathe in gently, hold, and exhale a little longer than your inhale. Do that again, slower this time. Now ask yourself, where in your life do people expect instant access to your attention? Is it work? A partner? A parent? A group chat? Think of one person whose messages instantly spike your anxiety. Don't overwhelm yourself with everyone, just hold one name or one thread in your mind. Picture the next time they send you something charged. Imagine yourself reading it without immediately reacting. Imagine letting your body settle first. Feel the space open up. That's the pause that will change the entire direction of that relationship over time. There's another layer here, and you'll see it clearly when we get to the real Friday night situation near the end. Because in that moment, someone sends you a message loaded with emotion, and you feel the pull. Your chest tightens. Your mind wants to fire back. But you won't. You're going to use this exact sentence. You're going to say, "I'll think about this and get back to you," and you'll watch the whole dynamic shift. The moment would have blown up your night. Instead, it becomes the turning point where you stay calm and preserve your sanity. And something else happens when you practice this pause consistently. You start realizing how many things that felt urgent were actually just emotional echoes from someone else's life. Not everything people send your way is yours to carry. Not every moment requires you to engage. Not every tone is your responsibility to manage. When you delay your reaction, you give your brain the chance to see the situation as it is, not as your adrenaline paints it. You might even notice how some people get calmer around you because your steadiness becomes contagious. You no longer match their panic or frustration. You don't escalate situations that were already fragile. Instead, you set a tone of clarity and groundedness. Over time, this becomes part of your identity. You become someone who doesn't get yanked around by emotional hooks. Someone who doesn't get hijacked by every feeling that enters the room. Someone who responds from strength instead of stress. You'll want to keep this tool close as we go further, because delaying your reaction is only part one of creating emotional freedom. Next, we're going to look at how your internal rules, or lack of them, shape your emotional life far more than other people's behavior. If you've ever felt like you keep getting pulled into the same kind of conflict again and again, the next idea is going to explain why and show you how to break that pattern for good. You can't build emotional control without personal rules, and most people don't realize they don't have any. They think they do, but when pressure hits, their reactions are entirely shaped by whatever emotion walks through the door, not by any internal standard they've set. The claim here is this: if you don't define your own emotional rules, other people will define them for you. And every time their mood shifts, your peace shifts with it. The stakes are huge. When you don't have rules, you say yes when you mean no, you take on tasks that drain you, and you let guilt drive your behavior in ways that make you resentful later. Without rules, you leak focus, energy, time, and confidence. You become reactive instead of deliberate. This works because rules act like a pre-installed boundary. They take the burden off your emotions at the moment. When you decide ahead of time how you respond to certain situations, you don't have to negotiate with yourself under pressure. That negotiation is what drains you. Think of how Epictetus emphasized focusing only on what's within your control. Personal rules bring that idea into daily life. They're a reminder that your behavior is yours, not a reflection of someone else's urgency or disappointment. When your rules are clear, your reactions become predictable to yourself, your stress decreases, and your identity strengthens. You stop feeling like you're improvising your life moment by moment. You start feeling like you're living from a stable center. The sentence you can use to anchor your rules is this: that's not one of my rules. You can also phrase it privately as, that's outside my rules for myself. You don't always say it out loud. Most of the time, it's an internal sentence that keeps you from collapsing into old habits. It gives you something to lean against when someone pushes for more than you can give. It's a quiet reminder that you're allowed to have limits, and you're allowed to stick to them without apologizing. Imagine how this plays out in real life. You're at work, and a coworker who always waits until the last minute comes to your desk with that familiar look of panic. They ask if you can help them finish a task that's due today, even though they've had 2 weeks to work on it. You've helped them before. Every time you do, you pay for it with your own stress, late hours, and the feeling that you're carrying more than you share. The old version of you immediately thinks, if I don't help, they'll think I'm selfish, or I don't want them to be upset with me. So you say yes, again, even though your body is screaming no. But now picture the new version of you. You listen. You breathe once. You remember your rule: you don't take on other people's last-minute emergencies unless you genuinely have capacity. You quietly say inside your mind, that's outside my rules for myself. Then you respond calmly, I can't take this on today, but I hope you're able to get it handled. You don't over-explain. You don't apologize. You stick to your rule. And instead of absorbing their stress, you keep your own stability intact. Your tiny action today is to define just one rule. Not 5, not a whole list, 1. Choose a place in your life where you keep abandoning yourself under emotional pressure. Maybe it's work favors. Maybe it's a family member who expects you to be available at all times. Maybe it's responding immediately to messages at night when you need rest. Your rule could sound like, I don't respond to emotionally charged messages after 8 p.m., or I don't take responsibility for other people's last-minute requests, or I don't fix things I didn't break. Write it somewhere you can see it. Today, follow just that one rule with discipline. Let's slow down for a moment so your nervous system can absorb this. Take a breath in, hold, and exhale slowly. Do it again, but let your shoulders drop a little as you exhale. Now think of the last time you broke your own boundary. Not with harsh judgment, just curiosity. What rule could have prevented that moment? Sit with that for a second. Feel how different the moment would have been if that rule had already existed. Notice how having a rule pulls you out of the emotional pull of the moment and back into your own authority. Rules aren't cages. They're anchors. They keep you steady when other people's emotions try to drag you somewhere you don't want to go. They create clarity so you don't waste mental energy agonizing over every request. They reduce guilt because you're not making decisions based on emotion, you're following your own standards. And something interesting happens when you start living with rules. People start adjusting to them. At first, they may test your limits because they're used to the old version of you. But when your rules stay consistent, people eventually interact with you differently. They respect your time more. They expect less emotional labor from you. Your relationships get healthier, even if there's a little friction at first. You'll need this rule-based foundation in the next idea, because we're about to talk about the difference between supporting someone and absorbing their emotional burden. And later, in that Friday night moment, you're going to see how a single rule prevents an argument that would have spiraled completely out of control. You'll watch yourself choose calm over chaos in a moment that once controlled you completely. There's a trap almost everyone falls into without realizing it. You confuse being emotionally supportive with being emotionally responsible. The claim in this part is direct. You can care deeply about people without carrying the full weight of their emotional world. If you don't learn this distinction, you will keep draining yourself by trying to regulate feelings that were never yours to manage. The stakes here are serious. When you take on emotional responsibility that doesn't belong to you, your own needs get pushed to the bottom of the list. You lose energy, focus, and even identity because you're constantly adjusting yourself to keep other people stable. And the worst part is that the more you do it, the more people expect it, until you feel guilty for even wanting your own peace. This shift works because your emotional system was never designed to hold the full load of other people's frustration, anxiety, disappointment, or fear. Your brain interprets their intensity as a signal that you must act. But that's conditioning, not truth. When you separate support from responsibility, you reclaim your emotional bandwidth. You show up with compassion instead of panic. You speak with clarity instead of overexertion. This is where some of Seneca's letters hit hard. He reminded his friend Lucilius that a wise person stands near the fire of others' struggles without letting themselves catch flame. You can be present without burning. You can care without absorbing. And more importantly, you can stay steady even when someone else is overwhelmed. The line you'll use to maintain this balance is simple and powerful. I'm here with you, but your feelings are yours to navigate. You can soften it depending on the situation. I'm with you, but this part is yours, or I care, and I trust you to handle your feelings. These lines affirm connection without accepting responsibility. They remind the other person that you're not abandoning them, but you're also not stepping into a role that isn't yours. Now picture this in an everyday North American moment. You're driving home from work, and your phone buzzes with a long message from someone you care about, maybe your partner, sibling, or close friend. They're upset. Something went wrong in their day. The message is intense, emotional, and you can feel the pull instantly. The old version of you would have gone straight into crisis management mode. You'd replay what they said, try to fix it, feel anxious for them, and maybe even apologize for something you didn't do just to calm them down. You'd carry their emotional weight for the next several hours, maybe even lose sleep over it. But now, with this new approach, something different happens. You give yourself a moment before responding. You breathe once. You let your nervous system settle. You tell yourself quietly, I'm not responsible for solving this feeling. Then you text something grounded, I'm here with you, but your feelings are yours to navigate. Tell me what you need from me right now. That single line changes the entire direction of the conversation. Instead of absorbing their emotional storm, you create space for them to handle their own weather. Instead of losing your night to someone else's intensity, you offer presence without self-sacrifice. And often, people calm down faster when they sense you aren't spiraling with them. Your tiny action today is to pick one relationship, romantic, family, friend, coworker, and define what support without responsibility looks like for that specific dynamic. Write one sentence that represents your version of the boundary. Something like, I listen, but I don't fix, or I can talk, but their feelings stay with them. Keep it small and specific. And in the next conversation where someone comes to you with emotional intensity, practice the microscript. One sentence is enough to shift your entire role. Let's take a slow moment together so you can actually feel the difference in your body. Inhale slowly, hold it, then exhale longer than you think you need to. Again, this time, let your chest soften a little. Now bring to mind someone whose emotions often become your responsibility. Imagine them talking to you, telling you something heavy, maybe even crying or expressing frustration. Notice your instinct to absorb. Notice your tendency to lean forward emotionally, to take on their burden. Now imagine saying quietly, even just in your mind, I'm here with you, but your feelings are yours to navigate. Feel the weight shift back to where it belongs. Feel how your shoulders settle. Feel how your breath gets deeper. This is what emotional freedom feels like in real time. You may worry that this will make you seem cold, but it does the opposite. When you stop trying to manage someone else's emotional landscape, you become more honest, more present, and less reactive. People feel safer around someone who doesn't panic when they express emotion. They feel more respected when you trust them to handle their internal world. And you stop resenting the very people you care about, because you're no longer sacrificing your well-being every time they have a feeling. A subtle thing happens when you practice this consistently. People start showing you their mature side more often. They stop running straight to you with emotional emergencies because they know you won't rescue them from themselves. They start approaching conversations with more clarity because they sense the stability you bring. Emotional responsibility shifts back to its rightful owner, and relationships become healthier because the roles aren't distorted. You'll need this tool when we reach the Friday night story later on. There's a moment where someone dumps a wave of emotion onto you and expects you to fix it. In the past, you would have absorbed all of it, twisted yourself into stress trying to calm them down, and ended the night feeling drained. But this time, you're going to stay grounded. You're going to breathe, use your sentence, and hand the responsibility back gently. And that will be the moment the dynamic changes. This idea connects directly to the next one, because now that you've separated support from responsibility, we're going to talk about how to identify emotional hooks, the subtle ways people pull you into drama without even realizing it. Once you can spot those hooks, you stop getting caught in cycles you never meant to join. And once you stop getting hooked, you start feeling like you actually own your attention again. There's a pattern that keeps pulling you into drama even when you think you're being neutral, and it usually happens before you're even aware of it. The pattern is emotional hooks. A hook is anything in someone's words, tone, or behavior that tries, intentionally or accidentally, to recruit you into their emotional state. The claim here is simple: if you want emotional control, you must learn to identify emotional hooks before they catch you. Because once they hook you, you're already reacting instead of choosing. And the stakes are real. If you never learn to see these hooks, you'll keep getting dragged into arguments you didn't start, responsibilities you didn't sign up for, and emotional spirals that leave you frustrated with yourself for falling for it again. This works because hooks bypass your rational mind and activate an old, instinctive part of you that wants to defend, explain, justify, or fix. Hooks trigger urgency. They poke at your guilt, your fear of disappointing someone, or your old habit of wanting to be seen as reasonable or helpful. When you learn to spot hooks at the moment they appear, your brain gets a second to reorient itself. You stop absorbing the emotional assignment embedded in someone's message. You stay anchored in your own lane instead of drifting into theirs. It's exactly what Marcus hinted at when he reminded himself to stay with what is in his control and not let external impressions drag him into internal chaos. Emotional hooks are just modern impressions, Slack messages, texts, sighs, accusations, sudden shifts in tone that make your nervous system flinch. Seeing them clearly is the first step to not reacting blindly. The line you'll use to neutralize a hook is short and grounding: I'm noticing the hook, and I'm not taking it. You don't say this to the other person, you say it quietly to yourself. You can also soften it to, that's a hook, I'm staying steady. This internal sentence interrupts the automatic pull. It keeps you from matching someone else's intensity, and it restores your ability to respond rather than absorb. Let's put this into a real North American moment so you can feel it in your body. Imagine you're getting ready for work in the morning. You're planning your day, thinking through your tasks, maybe enjoying a quiet coffee. Then a roommate or partner walks into the kitchen with a sharp tone. They say something like, "Must be nice to have nothing to worry about while I'm dealing with everything alone." Your stomach drops. Your instinct is to defend yourself. "What are you talking about? I'm dealing with a lot too." Or maybe you explain yourself. Or maybe you snap back. That's the hook working. It's tugging you into their emotional world, pulling you into a fight that isn't actually about you, and turning their stress into your stress. But now picture the new version of you in the exact same moment. You feel your body tighten, but instead of reacting, you breathe once. You quietly say to yourself, "I'm noticing the hook, and I'm not taking it." The pull weakens instantly. You look at the situation with clearer eyes. You recognize their comment as an emotional spillover, not a truth, not an attack that requires a defense, and not a crisis you must resolve. Maybe you respond calmly, "Sounds like you're having a rough morning. We can talk later if you want." Or maybe you simply say, "I hear you," and continue with your morning without getting swallowed. You didn't get hooked, and the entire direction of the moment shifted because of one sentence said internally. Your tiny action today is to identify 2 hooks that regularly catch you. It could be specific words like "you never," or "why don't you ever," or tones like sighs, sarcasm, guilt-loaded phrasing, or someone escalating urgency unnecessarily. Write down 2 hooks and what they usually cause you to do. That small awareness is enough to weaken their impact the next time you encounter them. Let's take a slow moment together so your body can learn this skill, not just your mind. Inhale gently through your nose, hold, and exhale slowly. Again, this time a little deeper. Now think of a recent moment when someone hooked you. Picture the hook as clearly as you can, the exact phrase, the tone, the shift in mood, the message that hit you the wrong way. Now imagine that same moment happening again, but this time you pause. You breathe once. You say quietly inside, "I'm noticing the hook, and I'm not taking it." Feel the emotional pull weaken. Feel yourself stay steady. Notice how much space appears between their behavior and your reaction. That space is your power. Hooks lose strength when you name them. When you can recognize a hook as a hook, it no longer feels personal. You stop internalizing it. You stop feeling triggered by it. You stop letting it shape your behavior. Instead, you stay anchored in your own emotional state. And over time, this becomes second nature. You feel hooks the same way you feel a cold gust of wind, just an environmental shift, not something that requires a full emotional reaction. There's something else worth noting. Some people will escalate slightly when their hook stops working. That's normal. They're used to the old version of you responding a certain way. But once they realize you aren't emotionally available for drama, the hooks lose power and the frequency drops. You become the steady one, not by suppressing emotion, but by refusing to let other people's emotional impulses dictate your internal weather. You'll need this awareness when we reach the Friday night story near the end. There's a moment when someone sends you a message dripping with hooks, tone, urgency, implication. In the past, you would have taken the bait immediately and launched into a long, heated exchange. But now, you're going to see the hook clearly. You're going to breathe, name it internally, and choose a calmer path. And that choice will prevent the entire night from collapsing into conflict. Next, we're going deeper into the concept of emotional distance, not detachment in the cold sense, but the healthy kind of space that allows you to see things without losing yourself in them. That distinction will unlock a level of peace you didn't realize you were allowed to have. There's a kind of emotional distance that isn't cold, detached, or dismissive, it's stabilizing. It's the kind of distance that lets you see things clearly without drowning in them. The claim here is simple: you need emotional distance to stay in control, especially when the people around you are chaotic, stressed, or dramatic. Without distance, every emotional moment feels like a personal event, and you get swept up in reactions that don't match your values. The stakes here are significant. If you never build this distance, you'll keep taking everything personally. You'll feel attacked when someone is simply overwhelmed. You'll react to every tone shift as if it's a threat. And the cost is your peace, your clarity, and your ability to make decisions from a stable place rather than a reactive one. This works because emotional distance gives your brain a wider field of view. Instead of zooming into the feeling right in front of you, you zoom out. You see context. You see patterns. You see that not everything intense requires an intense response. You recognize that someone snapping at you may have nothing to do with you at all. Emotional distance lets you separate who you are from whatever moment you're experiencing. It's what allows you to respond rather than absorb. And it's the heart of what the Stoics meant when they talked about stepping back from impressions to see things as they are, not as your fear or ego interprets them. Distance removes the distortion that emotion creates. It helps you show up as your grounded self instead of the version of you that reacts out of habit. The line you'll use to create emotional distance is this: I can observe this without becoming it. You can shorten it depending on the moment. I'm observing, not absorbing, or this is something I'm witnessing, not something I am. These sentences give you just enough space to breathe. They remind you that you are not fused to the moment. You have room to step back. You have room to choose. Picture a real-life moment where distance could have saved you. You're in a meeting at work, Zoom, office, doesn't matter, and a coworker interrupts you sharply. They sound annoyed. Maybe they disagree with your idea, or maybe their day is already falling apart. The old you would instantly feel embarrassed, defensive, or irritated. Your chest tightens. You over-explain. You talk faster to try to regain control. Or you shut down completely. Either way, their moment becomes your emotional state. You walk out of the meeting frustrated and replaying the interaction for hours. Now imagine the new you in the exact same moment. The interruption happens. You feel that tiny spike of adrenaline. But instead of reacting, you breathe once, quietly. You say internally, I can observe this without becoming it. Suddenly, you have space. You see that their tone might not be about you at all. You see that nothing is actually on fire. You see that you can respond calmly and continue your point without escalating. So you say something grounded like, I hear your concern, let me finish the thought, and then we can look at both angles. Instead of spiraling, you stay steady. The entire trajectory of your day changes because you didn't fuse your identity to a tense 30 seconds. Your tiny action today is to build a visual anchor for emotional distance. Choose one moment in your environment, your desk, car dashboard, bedside table, and put a small object there that reminds you to step back mentally. It could be a coin, a piece of paper, a ring, a sticky note. The object doesn't matter, the association does. Every time you see it, you mentally repeat the line, I can observe this without becoming it. This anchor trains your nervous system to create space automatically. Let's slow down for a moment so this can land in your body, not just your mind. Inhale deeply, pause, exhale slowly through your mouth. Do that again, but let your shoulders drop a little more. Now bring to mind the last emotionally heavy moment someone pulled you into. Maybe it was a text, a comment, an argument, a sigh, a tone shift. Picture it with clarity. Now imagine floating half a step back from the moment. Just a small shift. You're still present, but not consumed. Say quietly to yourself, I can observe this without becoming it. Feel the tension loosen. Feel your breath deepen. Feel how much lighter the moment becomes when you're not standing directly inside the emotional heat. Emotional distance doesn't make you cold. It makes you capable. It helps you listen better because you're not reacting defensively. It helps you speak more clearly because you're not overwhelmed. It helps you set boundaries without guilt because you're not fused to the other person's disappointment or frustration. It actually increases your compassion because you're steady enough to stay present with someone else without losing yourself in their feelings. And here's something people often overlook: emotional distance protects your relationships. When you stop taking everything personally, you stop escalating small moments into major conflicts. You become less reactive, less accusatory, less prone to misunderstanding. People feel safer talking to you because you're not instantly triggered by every emotional ripple. Distance is what lets you stay calm even during hard conversations. It's what lets you show up with emotional maturity rather than emotional reflexes. You're going to use this tool when we reach the Friday night moment later. There's a point in that story where someone sends you a message designed, knowingly or not, to pull you straight into their emotional storm. In the past, you would have jumped in. You would have matched their intensity. You would have spent the entire night stressed, angry, or exhausted. But now, you won't. You'll step back. Internally, you'll say, I can observe this without becoming it, and that tiny moment of distance will change the entire direction of the night. This sets up the next idea perfectly, because once you build distance, you can actually start choosing your emotional investments intentionally. And that's where your real power is. Not everything deserves your energy. Not every moment deserves your full emotional presence. And when you learn to choose deliberately rather than automatically, you unlock a level of peace and focus that finally feels like your life belongs to you again. There's a point in emotional control where everything becomes simpler, and it's this: not every situation deserves your energy. Most of the stress you feel comes from overinvesting in moments that don't matter, people who won't change, arguments that lead nowhere, and emotional invitations you never needed to accept. The claim here is straightforward: you regain your peace the moment you start choosing where your emotional energy goes instead of letting every moment claim it by default. And the stakes are big. If you never learn to make this choice, your mood becomes the property of anyone who wants to influence it. You wake up calm, but one text ruins your morning. You start a day focused, but one passive-aggressive comment derails your motivation. You want a quiet evening, but someone's drama pulls you into a 2-hour emotional assignment. If you keep giving your energy to the wrong places, you'll keep feeling like your life is one long reaction. This works because your emotional energy is a limited resource. You don't have endless capacity. You can't give everything the same level of attention without burning out. When you choose your emotional investments intentionally, you become more effective, more grounded, and more aligned with your values. You start noticing that some issues resolve themselves without your involvement. You realize that some people's patterns aren't yours to fix. You see that many conflicts shrink to nothing the moment you stop feeding them energy they don't deserve. Emotional investment is like focus: where you place it determines the quality of your life. When you reclaim that choice, you stop living in reaction mode and start living with intention. The sentence you'll use to enforce this shift is clean and powerful: this doesn't deserve my energy. You can also say, this isn't worth investing in, or my attention goes elsewhere. You don't need to speak these sentences out loud. They're internal cues that remind you to redirect your energy away from low-value emotional traps. They create instant clarity. They help you step out of the emotional fog and choose a calmer path. Let's put this into a common North American situation. Imagine you're sitting on your couch after a long day. You're tired, but not exhausted, and you're looking forward to a quiet hour, maybe a show, maybe a book, maybe just silence. Then your phone lights up with a notification from a group chat. The first message is harmless, but the next one? Someone makes a snide comment. Someone else responds defensively. Before you know it, the thread turns into a heated mess full of sarcasm, misunderstandings, and half-formed arguments. The old version of you would feel the pull immediately. You'd jump in, try to clarify things, try to fix the disagreement, or try to defend someone who's being misunderstood. Suddenly you've lost your entire evening to something that wasn't even your responsibility. Now picture the new version of you. The notification lights up. You preview the first few lines. You recognize the drama forming. You feel the pull, but this time, you pause. You breathe. You say quietly to yourself, this doesn't deserve my energy. And you set the phone down. You don't mute the whole chat forever, you simply choose not to step inside this particular moment. You reclaim your hour. You reclaim your peace. And nothing collapses without you. The argument resolves or fizzles out on its own. You didn't burn emotional fuel you didn't have. You didn't sacrifice your night. You stayed in control of where your energy went. Your tiny action today is to remove one low-value emotional drain from your daily life. Maybe it's muting a group chat for 24 hours. Maybe it's choosing not to respond to one baiting message. Maybe it's skipping the urge to read comments under a stressful post. Choose one emotional drain and refuse to invest in it today. That single act will show you how much peace is available when you stop paying emotional tax to things that don't deserve it. Take a slow moment with me right now to mark this shift in your nervous system. Inhale deeply, hold, exhale slowly. Again, but let your jaw unclench a little as you breathe out. Now bring to mind something that drained your emotional energy this week. Maybe it was an online argument. Maybe it was a small misunderstanding that grew bigger in your mind. Maybe it was someone complaining for the 10th time about the same problem. Picture it clearly. Now imagine stepping back from it, not ignoring, not suppressing, just refusing to invest more energy than it deserves. Say quietly, "This doesn't deserve my energy." Feel the release in your body. Feel the tension leave your shoulders. Feel the mental space return. This is emotional clarity. This is control. And there's a deeper truth here. When you stop giving your energy to low-value moments, you have more to give to high-value ones. You become more present in relationships that matter. You bring more focus to work that fulfills you. You have more emotional capacity for people who genuinely need and deserve your support. Emotional control isn't about being distant, it's about being discerning. It's about lifting your life by choosing the right emotional investments and letting everything else go. You'll see this clearly when we reach the Friday night story soon. There's a moment where someone's message tries to pull you into an unnecessary emotional battle. And the old you would have jumped in instantly, sinking hours into something that left you feeling hollow and frustrated. But this time, you'll pause. You'll breathe. You'll recognize the moment doesn't deserve your energy. And you'll walk away with your peace intact. This sets up the final shift before we enter the story, because once you learn to choose your emotional investments, the next step is applying everything under real pressure, where drama usually wins. And that's where the entire lesson locks into place. It's late on a Friday evening, and you're finally closing your laptop after a long week. You've been looking forward to this exact moment since Wednesday, a quiet night, no obligations, no emotional math to solve. You grab your jacket, ready to step out for a simple walk or maybe pick up dinner. Your mind is soft, unclenched, and almost light. Then your phone buzzes. You glance at the screen and see a message from someone who has a history of pulling you into emotional storms. The preview alone tells you everything. "We need to talk. I can't keep doing this with you." Your stomach tightens instantly. It's the exact kind of message that used to ruin your entire weekend. You feel the familiar surge of adrenaline. Your brain starts replaying the week, scanning for something you might have done wrong. Old patterns kick in. You almost open the message and fire back a long, defensive paragraph. You almost let the drama swallow your night whole. But something new happens this time. Before you even tap the notification, you hear your own internal voice, the one you've been practicing throughout this lesson. You pause. You breathe once, slowly, letting your chest soften just a little. You whisper in your mind, "This is the signal I received, the meaning is something I'm adding." And instantly, the emotional fog starts to thin. You open the message. It's long. Emotional. Loaded with hooks. There's a hint of accusation. A tone of urgency. Several lines worded just ambiguously enough to make you want to defend yourself. In the past, you would have jumped straight in, letting their emotion dictate your own. You would have started typing back immediately, heart racing, thoughts scrambling, trying to fix everything in real time. Your night, your peace, your sleep, gone. But tonight, you remember the pause. You set the phone on the counter and breathe again. You hear yourself say quietly, "I'll think about this and get back to you." You're not sending it yet, it's just grounding you. Then you notice the hooks, the subtle pulls designed to drag you into their emotional world. You hear that internal line again, I'm noticing the hook, and I'm not taking it. You feel the pull weaken. You pick up the phone again and read the message slowly, with distance. You say internally, I can observe this without becoming it. That small step of emotional distance shifts everything. The message no longer feels like an emergency. You can see more clearly that the emotional wave belongs to them, not you. The intensity in their words is a reflection of their state, not a diagnosis of your behavior. You're no longer drowning in their feeling, you're standing on the shore, watching the waves from a safe distance. You take a slow practice breath. In through your nose, hold, out gently. You let your shoulders drop as you exhale. Your body, which was bracing for impact, starts to relax. The pause becomes longer than usual, but not uncomfortable. Just long enough for your nervous system to choose intention over reflex. Then comes the turning point. Your old reaction tries to sneak back in. You feel a spark of frustration. A flash of defensiveness. The urge to type, that's not what happened, or why would you assume that? But now you see that tiny flicker clearly. It's the old version of you trying to reclaim a role you no longer want. You breathe again. The flicker fades. Your clarity returns. From this calm place, you type a short, grounded message, I got your message. I'll read it carefully and get back to you tomorrow. No defending. No explanation. No spiraling. You send it. Then you put the phone face down and walk out the door into the quiet night you planned for yourself. As you walk, you feel an unfamiliar kind of relief, not the relief of resolving a conflict, but the relief of not stepping into one. You kept your night. You kept your energy. You kept your peace. You realize you didn't abandon the conversation, you simply refused to let someone else's emotional urgency become your emotional state. You offered support without taking responsibility. You protected your energy without withdrawing your care. And for the first time in a long time, you feel in control of yourself. Later, the rest of the evening unfolds exactly the way you needed it to. You get the quiet, the space, the reset. And when you eventually return to the conversation the next day, you are so rested, clear-minded, and calm. The drama that once felt overwhelming now feels manageable. You respond with clarity because you didn't react from panic. And something else shifts, your relationship to conflict begins to mature. You're no longer pulled into emotional spirals. You're choosing your moments. You're choosing your energy. You're choosing yourself. And the most powerful part? You realize that emotional control isn't about shutting down. It's about staying open without being swept away. It's about holding your center even when someone else has lost theirs. It's about knowing that your peace isn't something people can take from you, it's something you give away, and something you can learn to keep. Everything you've practiced in this lesson comes down to one core idea. Emotional control is the difference between reacting to every feeling that comes toward you and responding only to what actually deserves your attention. When you learn to pause, to separate signals from meaning, to see hooks before they catch you, and to choose where your emotional energy goes, you shift from being pulled around by other people's chaos to standing in your own calm. It's the shift from mindless reaction to intentional presence, from scattered emotional habits to grounded emotional clarity. First, we looked at how quickly you get swept into stress the moment someone else's emotion enters your space, and how separating the raw signal from the meaning you add to it immediately gives you back control. Then we explored how delaying your reaction by even a few moments brings your thinking brain back online and prevents you from sending messages you regret. Next, we talked about building personal rules so you're not improvising your boundaries under pressure. After that, you learned how to support people without absorbing their emotional weight, so you can care without losing yourself. We then dug into emotional hooks, the subtle ways people recruit you into their feelings, and how naming the hook breaks the spell. You practiced stepping back with emotional distance so you can observe moments without becoming them. And then you learned to choose your emotional investments, freeing up energy by refusing to pour it into low-value drama. Finally, You watched all of these ideas work together in the Friday night story, where you stayed steady in a moment that used to derail your entire evening. Here are 3 steps you can take today to lock this in. First, choose one emotionally loaded message, text, email, comment, and write down the raw signal and the meaning you added on top. Seeing that difference will change everything. Second, create a short reply window for yourself. Before responding to anything that triggers you, repeat, "I'll think about this and get back to you," and let your body settle. Third, pick one low-value emotional drain, maybe a group chat or a recurring complaint, and remove your energy from it for the next 24 hours. Just one day of choosing where your attention goes will show you how much more grounded you can feel. If this resonated with you, the next lesson you'll want to watch is the one on strategic detachment, how to let go of outcomes you can't control without feeling cold or checked out. That lesson builds directly on this one by showing you how to stay calm even when situations don't go your way, and how to keep your peace when uncertainty tries to take over. If you want a whole library of Stoic focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships, this is what we do here every week. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.